She helped the old man every day his usual tea, 2 sugars, 1 apology for the delay. It was their ritual, their fragile peace. Until the morning his grandson walked into the cafe in a blue suit, stepped through the door, flanked by lawyers, and dropped a folder with her name on it. In one breath, Caroline went from sweet girl who helps the old man to the woman everyone suspected of manipulating him, her job, her reputation, even her future hanging by a thread. Why would a stranger treat kindness like a crime? And what did that old man hide that made ruining her life worth it? If your kindness was suddenly used as evidence against you, would you survive what she's about to face? Before we dive in, where are you watching from, and what kind of story do you want to see next? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in and don't let go, go ahead, hit subscribe. I have another powerful one coming tomorrow. Now, let's get into the story. The morning rush at Maple and Main Cafe always smelled the same. Burnt espresso, cinnamon, and the faint metallic tang of exhaustion that clung to Caroline George's uniform like a second skin. She moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, her smile bright despite the ache in her lower back and the overdue rent notice folded in her apron pocket. "Caroline, dear." She turned at the familiar voice. Jack Henderson stood by the door, rain-damp coat hanging loose on his thin frame, his eyes crinkling with the kind of warmth that made her chest tighten. "The usual, Mr. Henderson? You know me too well." He shuffled to his corner booth, the one by the window where morning light painted everything gold. Caroline prepared his order without checking the register. Chamomile tea, apple tart with extra cinnamon, 2 sugars. She brought it over, setting the tray down gently. 2 sugars, she said, and 1 apology for the delay. Jack's laugh was soft, papery. "No delay worth apologizing for, Caroline. You're the only one who remembers." She slid into the seat across from him, a stolen moment before the cafe filled up again. He told her about his late wife, Margaret, about the garden they'd kept together, about Sunday mornings that smelled like fresh bread and forgiveness. "My grandson used to love that garden," Jack said quietly, staring at the steam rising from his cup. "Before life made him hard." Caroline reached across the table, her hand covering his weathered knuckles. "People don't stay hard forever, Mr. Henderson. Sometimes they just forget how to soften." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Across town, Adrian Henderson straightened his tie in the glass-walled conference room of Henderson and Associates. Rain streaked the windows behind him, blurring the city into abstract shapes. He didn't notice. "The merger goes through by Friday," he said, his voice clinical, detached. "No compromises. We're not here to make friends. We're here to win." The opposing counsel shifted uncomfortably. Adrian's reputation preceded him, brilliant, ruthless, emotionally unreachable. At 34, he'd built an empire on the ruins of other people's vulnerabilities. His phone buzzed. Grandpa Jack flashed across the screen. Adrian silenced it without looking. The voicemail came through minutes later. He deleted it while reviewing contracts, his grandfather's voice reduced to a red notification that disappeared with a swipe. Emotions were liabilities. Sentiment was weakness. He'd learned that the hard way, watching his father's corruption trial, watching their family name become synonymous with betrayal. Jack had survived the scandal, but Adrian had turned himself into something untouchable. Cold, controlled, safe. By evening, his office was empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Adrian poured scotch into crystal and stared at his reflection in the dark window. Somewhere in the city, his grandfather was drinking chamomile tea, talking to a stranger who listened like she cared. Adrian raised his glass to the ghost of himself in the glass. "To winning," he murmured. That night, Jack Henderson's heart gave out quietly in his sleep, the way gentle things often do. The next morning, Caroline arrived at Maple and Main as the sky turned pink. She prepared Jack's order out of habit, chamomile tea, apple tart, 2 sugars, and set it on his table by the window. The bell above the door stayed silent. His seat remained empty. And Caroline, smoothing her apron with trembling hands, didn't yet know that the man who'd ignored his grandfather's final call was about to walk into her world and shatter everything she thought she understood about kindness, inheritance, and the price of loving someone the world had already forgotten. The funeral had been small. 12 people scattered across pews built for 200. Caroline sat in the back, clutching a folded napkin she'd found in Jack's coat pocket, the one with her handwriting on it. "Remember, you matter." She'd cried quietly, alone, while strangers in expensive suits whispered about estate details and property assessments. No one spoke to her. No one asked who she was. She was nobody, just the girl who poured his tea. A week later, she returned to Maple End, Maine because rent didn't pause for grief. The cafe felt different now, smaller, colder, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. She tied her apron, brewed the first pot of coffee, and tried not to look at the empty corner booth. The morning crawled by. Regulars came and went. Caroline moved through her shift on autopilot, her smile mechanical, her hands steady only because she'd perfected the art of falling apart in private. Then the bell above the door chimed. She looked up. 3 men in tailored suits stepped inside. The one in front wore royal blue, sharp lines, expensive fabric, the kind of confidence that turned air into property. His eyes swept the cafe with surgical precision, cataloging exits and weaknesses. When his gaze landed on Caroline, something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or calculation. The cafe conversations dimmed to murmurs. "Caroline George?" His voice cut through the space like a gavel. Her hands stilled on the espresso machine. "Yes." He crossed the floor and measured steps, flanked by the 2 lawyers. Up close, she could see the resemblance. Jack's nose, Jack's jawline, buried under decades of carefully constructed armor. "Adrian Henderson," he said. Not a greeting. A declaration. "We need to talk." She gripped the counter edge. "About." He placed a leather folder on the scarred wood between them, flipping it open with practiced efficiency. Legal documents. Dense paragraphs. Her name highlighted in yellow. "My grandfather," Adrian said, each word precise, controlled, "added you to his will 6 months ago. You're listed as a co-beneficiary alongside myself for a substantial portion of his estate." The world tilted. That's not possible." Caroline's voice came out thin, strangled. I never." "You didn't ask?" Adrian's tone was clinically polite, which somehow made it worse. "That's what makes it believable. That's what makes it effective." Behind her, the espresso machine hissed. Someone dropped a spoon. The metallic clatter rang out like a verdict. "I don't understand." Her hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter, but they betrayed her anyway, trembling, visible, weak. "Mr. Henderson was he was a regular. We talked. That's all." "You talked." Adrian's smile was razor-thin. "Every day. For 2 years. You learned his routines, his preferences, his vulnerabilities." He tapped the document. "Chamomile tea. Apple tart. 2 sugars." Caroline flinched. "That's not," her voice cracked. She tried again. "I cared about him." "I'm sure you did." Adrian's eyes were arctic. "Caring and calculation aren't mutually exclusive, Miss George. My grandfather was 83, recently widowed, estranged from family. He was lonely. And loneliness makes people." He paused, choosing his words like weapons. "Generous." The cafe had gone completely silent. Caroline felt every eye on her. The barista who'd trained her, the regulars she'd served for years, the couple in the corner booth who always tipped extra at Christmas. Shame crawled up her throat like acid. "I never asked him for anything." Her hands curled into fists. "Not once. Not ever." "That's the problem, Miss George." Adrian closed the folder with a soft snap. "You didn't have to." The words landed like a physical blow. Caroline's breath caught, her vision blurring at the edges. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to explain that Jack had been more than a regular. He'd been hope in a uniform, proof that kindness still mattered in a world that rewarded cruelty. But standing in front of this stranger wearing Jack's face, she couldn't find the words. Adrian straightened his cuffs. "My lawyers will be in touch regarding the estate verification process. We'll need documentation of your relationship with my grandfather. Bank statements. Text messages. Any gifts exchanged." "There weren't any gifts," Caroline whispered. Just tea. And conversation. Something flickered behind Adrian's eyes, too quick to name. Doubt maybe. Or discomfort. Then it was gone. "We'll be in touch," he repeated, and turned toward the door. "Wait." Caroline's voice was barely audible. Did you go to see him?" "Before." Adrian stopped. His shoulders tensed. Before he died, Caroline continued, louder now, anger threading through the grief. Did you visit? Did you call? Did you? That's not relevant to the legal matter at hand. It's relevant to me. Her voice broke. He talked about you. Every single day. He said you used to love his garden, that you were smart and kind before life made you hard. He waited. Enough. Adrian's voice was sharp now, the professional veneer cracking. My relationship with my grandfather is not your concern. It was his concern. Caroline's tears finally spilled over. And now he's gone, and you're here accusing me of what? Loving someone you couldn't be bothered to visit. The silence stretched taut between them, broken only by the harsh sound of Caroline's breathing. Adrian's jaw worked. His hands, she noticed, were clenched at his sides. We'll be in touch, Miss George. He walked out. The lawyers followed. The bell chimed once, twice, 3 times, each note a punctuation mark on everything that had just shattered. Caroline stood frozen behind the counter, her apron damp with spilled coffee she didn't remember dropping, her hands still shaking, her world reduced to whispers and stares and the sudden, awful understanding that kindness could be weaponized against you. That love could look like guilt. That grief had no defense. What would you do if kindness was used as evidence against you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The rumors started before Adrian's car had even left the parking lot. By noon, Caroline was that girl who conned the old man. By closing time, she'd seduced a dying widower for his money. The whispers followed her through aisles at the grocery store, trailed her on the bus, lived in the way her co-workers suddenly needed to check inventory whenever she entered the break room. She stopped eating lunch with the staff, started taking the long way home to avoid familiar faces, wore her headphones even when no music played, just to have an excuse not to hear the things people said when they thought she couldn't. The cafe manager called her into the office on Thursday. Caroline. Linda's voice was careful, measured. We need to discuss your situation. There is no situation. Caroline kept her eyes on the desk. Mr. Henderson was a customer. A friend. That's all. The lawyers are asking questions. Customers are uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with what? Me doing my job. Linda sighed. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying perception matters. And right now the perception is. I know what the perception is. Caroline stood. Am I fired? Not yet. But maybe take some time off. Let things cool down. Caroline left without her apron. Walked 3 miles home in the rain because she couldn't afford the cab and couldn't stand the looks on the bus. Unlocked her apartment door, slid down the wall, and finally let herself break. She cried until her ribs ached, until her throat was raw, until the grief and humiliation and rage all bled together into something too heavy to carry alone. But she carried it anyway. Because what choice did she have? Adrian spent the week buried in documents, bank statements, phone records, security footage from the cafe. He told himself he was being thorough, professional, that this was just another case requiring due diligence. He didn't admit, not even to himself, that he was looking for proof Caroline was telling the truth. The numbers didn't lie. No large deposits in her account. No suspicious transfers. No evidence of financial manipulation. Just minimum wage paychecks, late rent payments, and a credit card balance that made his chest tighten with something dangerously close to sympathy. He pushed the feeling down. Find anything? His lead counsel asked, leaning against the doorframe. Nothing conclusive. Adrian closed the laptop harder than necessary. So she's clean. Or she's smart. Adrian. The lawyer's voice softened. Your grandfather was a grown man. Maybe he just liked her. My grandfather was grieving. Vulnerable. People like her. He stopped, the words tasting wrong in his mouth. People like her what? Kind people. People who show up. Adrian's jaw clenched. This conversation is over. But alone in his office that night, staring at Caroline's employee photo from the cafe's website, he couldn't shake his counsel's words. People who show up. He'd built a career on reading people, on spotting manipulation and exploitation. And every instinct told him Caroline George was exactly what she appeared to be, which terrified him more than any con ever could. Because if she was genuine, if her kindness was real, then he'd just destroyed an innocent woman for the crime of caring about someone he'd abandoned. Adrian poured another drink. Didn't taste it. Just watched the city lights blur through his reflection in the window and tried not to think about the voicemail he'd deleted, the visits he'd postponed, the phone calls he'd let go to voicemail because billable hours mattered more than. His phone buzzed. A text from his investigator. Subject visited Oakwood Cemetery today. 4:47 p.m. No other visitors present. Adrian stared at the message, opened his laptop, pulled up the investigator's photo log. And there she was, Caroline, kneeling in the wet grass beside his grandfather's headstone, a small package wrapped in wax paper placed carefully at the base. Even from a distance, even in grainy surveillance quality, he could see her shoulders shaking. He zoomed in on the package. Apple tart. 2 of them, actually. Still warm, judging by the steam visible in the cold air. Chamomile tea. Apple tart. 2 sugars. Adrian's hand moved before his brain caught up, scrolling through the rest of the photos. Caroline visiting every Tuesday and Thursday. Always alone. Always bringing something. Flowers, a book, once a small potted plant that now sat beside the headstone. No cameras. No performance. Just grief, private and persistent. He closed the laptop. Sat in the dark. And for the first time in 15 years, Adrian Henderson let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost, and what he'd chosen to lose, when he decided safety mattered more than connection. Friday evening, Caroline returned to Oakwood Cemetery. The November wind cut through her thin jacket, but she barely noticed. She'd grown used to being cold. She placed the apple tart beside Jack's headstone, her ritual now familiar. 2 tarts this week, 1 for him, 1 for the Margaret he'd loved so much. They think I used you, she whispered to the granite. They think I pretended to care so I could. Her voice broke. I don't even know what they think I wanted. You never had much. Just stories. Just time. The wind rustled through dead leaves. I miss you, Caroline continued. I miss the way you'd smile when I got your order right. The way you'd tell the same stories but change the details just to see if I was listening. I miss. She stopped. There was a figure standing 3 rows back, half hidden by an oak tree. Even in the fading light, even at a distance, she knew that silhouette, that posture, that expensive coat that cost more than her monthly rent. Adrian. Their eyes met across the cemetery. Neither moved. Neither spoke. But in that stretched moment, grief meeting guilt, anger meeting shame, something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. Or a question that neither was ready to answer. Did you love him too? Did you grieve? Did you fail him the way I think I did? Caroline looked away first. Stood. Brushed grass from her jeans with hands that had finally stopped shaking. When she looked back, Adrian was gone. But the apple tart she'd left on the grave, the one meant for Margaret, had a twin beside it now. Store-bought, still in its plastic container, clumsily placed. And tucked underneath, a small white card with 2 words in sharp, professional handwriting. I'm sorry. Caroline picked up the card. Turned it over. Nothing else. Just those 2 words, inadequate and honest and human. She pressed it to her chest. And for the first time since the cafe confrontation, she let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, Jack's grandson wasn't as hard as he pretended to be. That maybe he'd just forgotten how to soften. Just like she'd said. Have you ever been too proud to admit you were wrong, even when you knew it? Tell us your story in the comments. The call came on Monday morning, Adrian's lawyer, not Adrian himself. Clinical. Brief. We need Miss George's cooperation for estate verification. Inconsistencies in the property records required joint review. Caroline almost hung up. But rent was 2 weeks overdue, and the cafe had indefinitely postponed her return to work. She met them at Henderson and Associates on Tuesday. The building was all glass and chrome, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. Adrian waited in a conference room that overlooked the city, his back to the door, shoulders rigid with tension. He probably thought he was hiding. Miss George. He turned, and she saw it immediately, the circles under his eyes, the tie slightly crooked, the crack in his armor that hadn't been there before. Mr. Henderson. The formality felt absurd after the cemetery. After the card she'd kept folded in her pocket like a secret. His lawyer spread documents across the table. Jack Henderson's estate includes a property in Meadowbrook, 40 minutes outside the city. The deed lists both of you as joint inheritors, but the asset verification shows discrepancies in the transfer timeline. Caroline stared at the address. I've never heard of this place. Neither had I, Adrian said quietly. Until last week. Their eyes met. Held. We need to visit the property, the lawyer continued. Verify its condition, check for additional documentation. Given the joint inheritance, both parties should be present. Caroline wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell Adrian Henderson and his lawyers and his glass tower exactly where they could file their estate verification. But Jack's voice echoed in her memory. My grandson used to love that garden before life made him hard. Fine, she said. When? Now if possible. Weather's turning. There's a storm coming in tonight. They took Adrian's car. A sleek black sedan that smelled like leather and expensive cologne and money that had never worried about rent. Caroline pressed herself against the passenger door, watching bare trees blur past, acutely aware of the silence stretching between them. 20 minutes in, Adrian spoke. The card. Did you? He stopped. Started again. I didn't know if you'd. I got it. Caroline kept her eyes on the window. I meant it. Did you? The words came out sharper than intended. Or did your lawyers tell you an apology might help your case? Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that. Silence again, but different now, charged honest. You really think everyone's out to get you? Caroline asked finally. Only the ones who smile too kindly. Adrian glanced at her, something almost like humor in his eyes. Present company included. I wasn't trying to get anything. I know. He said it so quietly she almost missed it. I've been looking into things. Your finances. Your history. And either you're the most sophisticated con artist I've ever encountered, or I'm exactly who I said I was. Yes. The word hung between them, an admission and apology, a bridge built from 2 syllables. Caroline turned to face him fully. Why didn't you visit him? In 2 years, why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. Adrian's voice was flat, matter of fact. Because looking at him meant remembering what my father did. The trial. The way everyone looked at us after. And it was easier to bury myself in work than deal with the fact that I was abandoning the only family I had left. The honesty gutted her more than any accusation had. He never stopped hoping you'd come back, Caroline said softly. He kept your chair at the table. Metaphorically speaking. Adrian's jaw worked. I know. I read his journals. The lawyers found them in storage. He wrote about you? Obsessively. Pages and pages about the grandson who used to catch fireflies and build tree houses and believe in second chances. His voice cracked. Before I taught myself not to feel anything. Caroline's throat tightened. Is that why you were so angry at the cafe? Because seeing someone actually care about him reminded you that you didn't. I cared. The words came out fierce, defensive. Then quieter. I just didn't show up. And apparently, you can't love someone from a distance and expect them to know it. The house appeared through the rain, a small cottage set back from the road, surrounded by overgrown gardens and memories. The storm had broken early, turning the world gray and blurred. They ran from the car, Adrian fumbling with keys while rain soaked through their clothes. The door finally gave, and they stumbled inside, breathless and dripping. The cottage was dark, dust-covered, frozen in time. But even in the gloom, Caroline could see traces of Jack everywhere. Photographs on the mantel, worn furniture arranged with care, a kitchen that still smelled faintly of cinnamon. He lived here, she whispered. After my grandmother died. Before the assisted living. Adrian moved through the space like a ghost, touching door frames, trailing fingers along walls. I helped him pack. Promised I'd visit. But you didn't. No. Thunder rolled overhead. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Perfect, Adrian muttered. Of course. Caroline pulled out her phone, battery at 3%. There's candles. I saw them in the kitchen. They worked in near darkness, finding candles and matches, creating small circles of light against the storm. The sound of rain on the roof was deafening, intimate, like the world had shrunk to just this cottage, and the two of them orbiting each other in the gloom. Adrian found a box in the hallway closet, labeled garden plans, in Jack's shaky handwriting. Inside, sketches, seed packets, photographs of sunflowers and tomato plants, and a young boy with dirt on his face and joy in his eyes. "That's you," Caroline said, looking over his shoulder at the photo. "A lifetime ago." He kept it. He kept all of this. Adrian's hand trembled as he set the photo down. Caroline saw the moment it hit him. The full weight of love preserved, of memories held sacred, of a grandfather who'd kept the faith even when his grandson had lost it. "I don't know how to do this," Adrian said quietly. "I don't know how to be the person he thought I could be." Caroline moved closer, her shoulder brushing his in the candlelight. "Maybe you start by being honest. Maybe you start by showing up. I'm here now." I noticed. Their eyes met in the flickering light, grief mirrored, guilt shared, walls crumbling brick by brick. "Caroline," his voice was rough, "I'm sorry. For all of it. The accusations, the lawyers, the way I made you feel like your kindness was a crime. You gave my grandfather something I couldn't, presence, attention, the feeling that he mattered. And instead of thanking you, I tried to destroy you for it. Why? Because it was easier than admitting I'd failed him." Adrian's eyes shone in the candlelight. "And because people like you, people who care without agenda, scare the hell out of people like me." "People like you," Caroline echoed. "You mean people who've been hurt?" "I mean people who've forgotten how to trust that kindness is real." The rain hammered harder. The candles guttered. And in that storm-dark cottage, surrounded by the ghost of a man who'd loved them both, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness yet. Not trust. But possibility. When was the last time you let your walls down with someone you thought was your enemy? Share in the comments. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it grew angrier. Wind howling through gaps in the old cottage's walls, rain drumming a relentless percussion against windows that rattled in their frames. Caroline and Adrian moved through the rooms with purpose now, no longer strangers orbiting each other, but reluctant allies searching for answers neither was sure they wanted to find. Adrian opened drawers. Caroline checked bookshelves. They worked in near silence, the only sounds their breathing and the storm's fury, and the occasional creak of floorboards that had memorized Jack's footsteps but were learning theirs. It was Caroline who found it. "Adrian." Her voice cut through the quiet. "There's something here." He crossed to where she stood by Jack's reading chair, a worn leather recliner positioned to catch morning light. She held a Bible, its cover cracked and soft with age, pages marked with countless strips of paper and pressed flowers. "Inside the cover," she said, her fingers trembling as she opened it fully. There, taped to the inside front cover, was an envelope. "To whoever finds this first," written in Jack's shaky script. Beneath it, smaller, probably Caroline. She always paid attention. Adrian's throat worked. "Open it." Caroline's hands shook as she tore the seal. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded around a brass key. She read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "My dear Caroline and Adrian, if you're reading this together, I hope you are. By now you've probably realized that my estate is more complicated than it should be. That's intentional. Not to confuse you, but to protect you. The property you're standing in, 402 Meadowbrook Lane, is held in both your names because it's the only asset I managed to hide from the legal seizures after Thomas's trial. Adrian's father, my son, made terrible choices. The courts took nearly everything, and what they didn't take, the guilt did. I put this house in Caroline's name first, 2 years ago, when I realized Thomas's creditors were still circling. Then I added Adrian's name 6 months ago, when I knew my time was running short. Not because I wanted to divide you, but because I wanted to unite you. Caroline, you showed an old man that kindness still exists, that people still see each other. You never asked for anything, which is exactly why you deserve everything I can give. Adrian, you stopped visiting because you were ashamed of your father's choices. But his sins were never yours to carry. I never blamed you. I only missed you. This house, this space, is my apology to you both. Caroline, for the world that made you struggle despite your goodness. Adrian, for the family that made you believe love was a weakness. There's more to find. Follow the key. With all my love, Jack Henderson. The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian stood frozen, his jaw clenched so tight Caroline could see the muscle jumping. His eyes were fixed on the letter, but not seeing it, seeing something else, somewhere else, some moment he'd buried and refused to excavate. He never blamed me. Adrian whispered finally. All this time I thought, his voice splintered. I thought he was ashamed. That seeing me would remind him of what Thomas did. So I stayed away to protect him from the reminder. Adrian, I was protecting myself. The words came out harsh, self-lacerating. Not him. Me. Because if I saw him, I'd have to admit that I'd become exactly what I swore I'd never be. Someone who abandoned the people who loved them. Caroline stepped closer, the letter still in her hand. He knew that. He understood. Understanding isn't the same as forgiving. No, Caroline said softly. It's better. It's bigger. Adrian's hand found the key in the envelope, his fingers closing around brass worn smooth by someone else's touch. Where does it go? There's an address on the back. Caroline turned the key over. 338 Orchard Road. That's not far from here. Another property? Or a storage unit? Or, Caroline met his eyes. Or answers. They couldn't go tonight. Not in this storm. Not with roads already flooding and visibility near zero. But morning came eventually, the way it always does, indifferent to human drama. They drove in silence, exhaustion and anticipation tangled together. The address led them to a small storage facility on the edge of town. The kind with orange doors and combination locks, and lives packed into 10 by 10 squares. Unit 338 opened with a metallic groan. Inside boxes. Dozens of them, neatly labeled in Jack's handwriting. Adrian, age 6. Adrian, age 10. Family photos. Margaret's garden. Letters unsent. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Adrian stepped inside like he was entering a tomb. He opened the first box with hands that had forgotten how to be gentle. Inside, crayon drawings signed in a child's wobbly script. To Grandpa Jack. Love, Adrian. Construction paper cards for birthdays and Christmases and random Tuesdays. Photographs of a boy covered in mud, grinning gap-toothed beside sunflowers taller than he was. He kept everything, Adrian breathed. Every single thing. Caroline moved to another box, this one labeled letters unsent. She lifted the lid carefully. Dozens of envelopes. All addressed to Adrian. None mailed. She handed him one, dated 3 years ago. Adrian's hands shook as he opened it. Dear Adrian, I saw you on the news today. Another case won, another company saved. Your mother would be so proud. I'm proud too, even if I don't know how to tell you anymore. I think about the garden sometimes. Remember when you were 8 and insisted we plant tomatoes in November? You were so sure they'd grow if we just believed hard enough. They didn't, of course. But we laughed about it. We laughed so much back then. I don't blame you for staying away. Thomas's trial hurt all of us. But I want you to know, you are not your father. You never were. You never could be. I'm still here. Still waiting. Still hoping you remember how to soften. Love always, Grandpa. Adrian's face crumpled. The letter slipped from his fingers, drifting to the concrete floor like a white flag of surrender. Caroline. His voice was wrecked. He was waiting. This whole time, he was waiting, and I. Hey. She was there suddenly, her hand on his arm, her presence solid. You're here now. You showed up. 2 years too late. Better late than never. Is it? Adrian's eyes were wet, raw. Is it better to show up after they're gone? To realize you loved someone only after you've lost the chance to tell them? Caroline's grip tightened. Yes. Because the alternative is never realizing it at all. Because love doesn't die just because someone does. Because, her voice caught. Because he left you this. All of this. Every letter, every drawing, every piece of proof that you mattered to him. That's not punishment, Adrian. That's grace. Adrian looked around the storage unit, at the boxes of childhood preserved, at the letters that testified to hope deferred but never abandoned, at the evidence of a love so patient it outlasted pride and shame and fear. He trusted me, Adrian said finally, the realization settling into his bones. Even after I disappeared. Even after I proved I couldn't be trusted. He put the house in both our names because he trusted me to eventually become the person he always believed I was. Or maybe, Caroline said gently, he trusted me to help you remember who you always were. Their eyes met in the dim storage unit light. Two people shaped by absence, learning to be reshaped by presence. Adrian reached for another box. This one, Jack's journal, final year. He opened it with reverence. flipped through pages of daily entries, medical appointments, notes about weather and meals, and the slow, steady march toward an ending. Then Caroline's name appeared. Met the most remarkable young woman today at the cafe. Caroline. She remembered my order without writing it down. 2 sugars and 1 apology for the delay, she said. Haven't heard someone apologize for simple human kindness in years. Reminded me of what Adrian used to say when he was small. Sorry, I love you so much, Grandpa. Children apologize for love. Adults hoard it like currency. Caroline hasn't learned to hoard yet. Hope she never does. Caroline's hand pressed against her chest, her breath catching. Adrian kept reading, his voice steadying as Jack's words connected past and present like thread through fabric. Caroline asked about Adrian today. I told her he used to love the garden. She said, people don't stay hard forever. Sometimes they just forget how to soften. Thought about that all day. Thought, maybe she's right. Maybe he's not lost, just waiting for permission to come home. Adrian closed the journal carefully, set it down, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. He knew, Adrian said finally. He knew you'd find me. That you'd, he laughed, broken and real. That you'd be exactly what you are. Someone who shows up. Someone who remembers. Caroline wiped her eyes. He left us each other, Adrian. That was the inheritance. The truth of it settled between them. Not property or money or legal claims, but connection. The wealth of being seen. The inheritance of not having to carry grief alone. Have you ever discovered something about a loved one after they were gone that changed everything? Tell us in the comments. The Meadowbrook Cottage became their project. Their sanctuary. Their second chance at something neither could quite name yet. Adrian showed up the following Saturday with paint supplies, work gloves, and a toolbox that looked suspiciously unused. Caroline arrived with cleaning supplies, a portable speaker, and a determination to make Jack's space feel lived in again. You've never painted before, have you? Caroline asked, watching Adrian study the paint like it was a legal brief. How hard can it be? He pried the lid open with excessive force, sending a spray of cream-colored paint across his expensive shoes. Damn it. Caroline pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. Go ahead, Adrian said dryly. I can see you wanting to. The laugh burst out of her, bright and real. I'm sorry, it's just, those shoes probably cost more than my rent. They did. Adrian looked down at the splattered leather, then back at her. Something shifted in his expression. Past tense, apparently. He kicked them off, rolled up his sleeves, and picked up a paintbrush with the grim determination of someone entering battle. You hold it like this, Caroline said, moving closer to adjust his grip. Her hand covered his for a moment. Warm, sure teaching. And you don't stab at the wall. You stroke. Like this. Adrian watched her demonstrate, his attention split between the technique and the way afternoon light caught in her hair, turning brown to bronze. Got it, he said, not entirely referring to the painting. They worked through the afternoon, transforming walls from dingy cream to soft sage green. The color Jack had noted in his journal as Margaret's favorite. The speaker played quiet music, folk songs about home and belonging and roads that always led back to where you started. Adrian was terrible at painting. Methodical but graceless, leaving streaks and drips despite Caroline's patient instruction. She was better, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to make the most of limited resources. You're thinking too hard, she said, watching him concentrate on perfect edges. It's just paint. It's allowed to be messy. I don't do messy. I've noticed. Caroline dipped her brush, then, deliberately playfully, flicked a spot of paint onto his forearm. There. Now you're messy. Adrian stared at the green dot. Then at her. Then at his own paintbrush. Don't you dare, Caroline warned, backing up. Don't I dare what? He moved toward her with predatory slowness, brush raised. Adrian Henderson, I swear. The paint fight lasted approximately 30 seconds and destroyed any pretense of professional distance. They ended up laughing breathless, speckled with sage green like strange forest creatures, the walls half-finished and neither of them caring. Truce, Caroline gasped, holding up paint-covered hands. Truce before we ruin everything Jack owned. Too late. Adrian gestured at the dropped cloth, the splattered furniture, his completely ruined shirt. We're disasters. Speak for yourself. I'm charmingly paint-enhanced. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Lighter than grief, warmer than friendship, fragile as new growth. They ordered pizza because neither of them could cook and ate sitting on the floor because the furniture was covered in paint-stained sheets. The cottage smelled like fresh paint and chamomile tea. Caroline had found Jack's stash and insisted on making it the right way. 2 sugars, Adrian asked when she handed him a mug. 1 actually. You're not Jack. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. You get to have your own order. Adrian stared into his tea. I don't know what my order is. I usually just drink whatever's strongest and fastest. That's sad. That's efficiency. Same thing sometimes. Caroline took a sip of her own tea. You know what Jack told me once? He said the world rewards speed, but remembers slowness. That the things worth having take time. Sounds like something he'd say. Adrian's voice went soft. He was always trying to slow me down when I was a kid. Adrian, you're going to miss the fireflies if you keep running. Adrian, the tomatoes won't grow faster because you check on them every hour. Did you? Check on them every hour. Every 30 minutes. Adrian smiled at the memory. I was convinced observation would speed up the process. Very scientific. Very wrong. Caroline laughed. That's the most lawyer kid thing I've ever heard. I was intense even then. He paused. Probably why I'm so good at pushing people away now. Decades of practice. You're not pushing me away. I tried. You're surprisingly hard to intimidate. That's because I've been broke and exhausted for so long that lawyers in fancy suits don't scare me anymore. Caroline nudged his shoulder. Also, you're not as scary as you think. The paint in your hair kind of ruins the intimidation factor. Adrian reached up self-consciously. Sure enough, green streaks through dark hair. Fantastic. It's a good look. Very reformed corporate lawyer discovers the joy of manual labor. Is that what I'm discovering? Caroline's expression softened. I think you're discovering that life doesn't have to be a case you're trying to win. That sometimes you can just be. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, the truth of her words settling like dust after demolition. I like being here, he said finally. With you. Working on this. It feels, he struggled to name it, real. Like nothing else in my life is real. Maybe everything else is real too. Just different kinds of real. You're very wise for someone who pours coffee for a living. Poured. Past tense. Caroline's smile dimmed slightly. They asked me not to come back. Indefinitely. Caroline, Adrian set his mug down. That's my fault. I'll fix it. I'll talk to them, No. She put her hand on his arm, stopping him. You don't get to fix everything just because you feel guilty. Sometimes consequences just are. And we live through them. But it's not fair. Life rarely is. Jack taught me that too. She squeezed his arm gently. But unfair doesn't mean unbearable. I'll find something else. I always do. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and saw strength he'd mistaken for softness, resilience he'd misread as naivety. She wasn't weak for being kind. She was fierce for choosing kindness despite everything that punished her for it. Help me, he said suddenly. Help you what? With the house. With fixing it up, sorting through Jack's things, deciding what stays and what goes. Adrian's words came faster, more certain. I'll pay you. More than the cafe did. We'll call it estate management or inventory consulting or whatever makes it legitimate. But really he stopped, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I don't want to do this alone. And you knew him better than anyone. You should be part of deciding how his legacy lives on. Caroline's eyes shone. Adrian, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He held her gaze. Let me do something right for once. Let me choose presence instead of avoidance. Let me, his voice dropped. Let me show up. The words hung between them, weighted with all the times he hadn't shown up, all the moments he'd chosen safety over connection. Caroline nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm keeping track of hours. This is a real job, not charity. Agreed. Adrian extended his hand formally. Welcome to Henderson Estate Services. Population, 2 disasters covered in paint. She took his hand, shook it solemnly, then pulled him to his feet. Come on, boss. These walls won't finish themselves. They worked into the evening, painting and laughing, and discovering that grief didn't have to be heavy all the time. That healing could look like work gloves and terrible technique, and music playing while rain drummed a rhythm overhead. Caroline taught Adrian to cook, or tried to. The pasta was salvageable. The sauce was not. "How did you burn tomato sauce?" Caroline asked, staring at the scorched pot. Multitasking. Adrian had been reading another of Jack's journals while stirring. "I got distracted." "By what?" He showed her the entry. Adrian used to insist on helping with dinner. Margaret would give him a wooden spoon and a pot to stir, and he'd stand there for hours, so serious about his job. Never burned a thing because he gave it his complete attention. Wish he'd remember that concentration is love made visible. Caroline read it twice. Looked at Adrian, this man who'd taught himself to split his focus, to never be fully present, to protect himself through distance. "Concentration is love made visible," she repeated softly. "I forgot how to concentrate on anything that wasn't work." Adrian's voice was rough. "How to give anything my complete attention." Caroline moved closer, took the spoon from his hand, set it aside. "Then maybe it's time to remember." She was standing very close now. Close enough that he could see the paint smudge on her cheek, smell the chamomile on her breath, feel the warmth radiating from her like a promise. "Caroline," he said, her name a question he didn't know how to finish. "Yeah. Thank you. For not giving up on him. For not giving up on," he swallowed hard. "For showing me it's not too late to be someone worth knowing. You were always worth knowing, Adrian. You just didn't let anyone close enough to see it." The moment stretched, delicate and charged. Then Caroline smiled, soft real, and turned back to salvage dinner. They ate burnt pasta by candlelight when the power flickered off again, laughing about their incompetence, comfortable in the growing intimacy of shared imperfection. And when they found Jack's last letter, tucked in a kitchen drawer, addressed simply to both of you, they read it together, shoulders touching, hearts open. "If you're reading this, you found each other. Good. That's all I ever wanted. Take care of my house. But more importantly, take care of each other. Love is the only thing worth inheriting. Everything else is just furniture." Adrian's hand found Caroline's in the candlelight. Their fingers interlaced slowly, carefully, like people learning to trust that holding on wouldn't hurt. "We're going to be okay," Caroline whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by half-painted walls and burnt pasta, and the ghost of a man who'd believed in second chances, Adrian let himself believe her. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. Caroline saw it first, scrolling through her phone over coffee at the cottage. Adrian still asleep upstairs after they'd worked late into the night assembling Jack's old bookshelf. Her thumb froze mid-scroll. Corporate lawyer's inheritance scandal, gold digger or genuine. Sources say Adrian Henderson's mystery woman may have manipulated dying grandfather. Below the headline, photos. Her and Adrian leaving the storage facility. Laughing together outside the cottage, paint-stained and close. Holding hands in the candlelit window. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation. Never quite accusing, always implying. Sources close to the Henderson estate suggest Caroline George, 28, formed an unusually close bond with the late Jack Henderson, 83, in what legal experts are calling a textbook case of undue influence. Adrian Henderson, grandson and prominent attorney, has been seen spending considerable time with Miss George despite initially contesting her inheritance claim. Her hands started shaking. Questions remain about the nature of their current relationship and whether Henderson's change of heart represents genuine reconciliation or something more calculated. "It's not uncommon for con artists to work in pairs," noted one estate attorney we spoke with. "The grandson accuses, then conveniently discovers the claim is legitimate? It's almost too neat." The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Adrian appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled, wearing the old university sweatshirt she'd found in Jack's closet. "What happened? Are you?" He saw her face. "Caroline." She couldn't speak. Just held out her phone with a trembling hand. He read in silence. She watched his expression shift, confusion, then comprehension, then something that looked horribly like resignation. "Adrian." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me this isn't from your firm." His silence was answer enough. "Adrian, please." "I don't know." He handed back her phone, his jaw tight. "I don't know where this came from. But it could be." It could be your partners, your colleagues, someone who. Maybe. The word was clipped careful. Probably. And you're just what? Accepting it. I'm saying I don't know what you want me to do about it. His voice had gone flat, professional. The tone he'd used that first day in the cafe. The tone she'd thought they'd moved past. I can't control what the press writes. You can deny it. You can issue a statement, you can. Her voice cracked. You can say something that isn't this careful, calculated non-answer. Adrian's phone started buzzing. Then buzzing again. He glanced at the screen. Messages flooding in, calls from numbers she recognized from his office. I need to take these, he said. Now. Caroline, my reputation is. He stopped. Tried again. This affects my career. My firm. If I'm associated with any kind of fraud allegation. Fraud. The word came out sharp, wounded. You know I didn't. You know we didn't. I know that. But they don't. And in my world, perception is reality. Your world, Caroline repeated, the words tasting like ash. So which world am I in, Adrian? Because 5 hours ago we were building bookshelves and talking about the future, and now you're worried about your reputation. His phone buzzed again. He answered it this time, turning away from her. Henderson. Yes, I saw it. No, I haven't issued a statement yet. I need to. Caroline stood there, watching him pace, watching him slip back into the armor he'd been slowly removing, watching him choose, in real time, right in front of her, which version of himself to be. She walked out while he was still on the phone. By noon, the story had metastasized. Social media dissected every photo, every interaction, every moment of their growing closeness with the cruelty of strangers who'd never had to choose between love and self-preservation. Gold digger finds a mark in the grandson too. Clever. Two grifters working together. Classic long con. She took advantage of a lonely old man, and now she's manipulating his guilt-ridden grandson. Wake up, people. Caroline's phone died from the constant notifications. She didn't charge it. She went to the cafe, her old sanctuary, hoping to hide in the familiar. But the whispers started the moment she walked in. The new girl behind the counter, someone hired to replace her, watched her with poorly disguised suspicion. Linda emerged from the office, her expression tight. Caroline, you can't be here. I just wanted coffee. You're upsetting the customers. Caroline looked around. Everyone was staring. Some pitying, most judging, all certain they knew her story better than she did. Right. She turned to leave, her vision blurring. Of course. Outside, a local news van was parked across the street. A reporter spotted her, started moving in her direction. Caroline ran. She ended up at Oakwood Cemetery, sitting beside Jack's grave with her knees pulled to her chest, crying so hard her ribs ached. I tried, she whispered to the headstone. I tried to help him, tried to show him it was okay to feel again, and now the whole world thinks I'm. Her voice broke. God, Jack, what do I do? How do I prove I'm not what they're saying when the only person who could defend me won't? The wind offered no answers. Her phone, miraculously still functional despite everything, buzzed with a single text from Adrian. We need to talk. My office. 4 p.m. She almost didn't go. But some desperate, foolish part of her hoped he'd called her there to fix this. To stand beside her. To choose her the way she'd chosen him. Henderson and Associates felt different now. Hostile. The receptionist's smile was glacial. The whispers followed Caroline through the lobby like a physical presence. Adrian's office door was closed. She knocked once, heard his muffled come in. He stood by the window, his back to the door, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. Every inch the corporate lawyer who'd walked into the cafe 6 weeks ago and accused her of exploitation. Thank you for coming. His voice was formal. Distant. Adrian, what's going on? He turned, and she saw it immediately. The walls rebuilt, the armor restored. The man she'd been falling for buried beneath the man he'd trained himself to be. My firm has advised me to distance myself from the estate situation. From, he gestured vaguely, from the appearance of impropriety. The appearance? Caroline's voice shook. You mean from me? I mean from a situation that's become legally and professionally complicated. Stop talking like a lawyer and talk to me like a human being. I'm trying to protect both of us. No. The word came out fierce, final. You're trying to protect yourself. And you're doing it by sacrificing me. Adrian's jaw clenched. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Caroline's voice rose, months of exhaustion and heartbreak finally breaking through. I lost my job because of you. I lost my reputation. I've been called every horrible name imaginable by people who've never met me. And through all of it, I kept believing. She laughed, bitter and broken. I kept believing that you knew the truth. That you'd stand by it. Stand by me. Caroline, say it. She moved closer, tears streaming freely now. Say you know I didn't use Jack. Say you know this is all lies. Say something real for once in your carefully constructed life. Silence. It stretched between them, vast, unbridgeable. I believe you, Adrian said finally, quietly. I do. Then why won't you say it publicly? Because he stopped. Started. Stopped again. Because it won't matter. Because the narrative is already written. Because coming to your defense now will only make things worse for both of us. Or maybe, Caroline said softly, devastatingly, you're just afraid. Afraid that choosing me means losing everything you've built. That being associated with someone like me, someone broke and powerless and ordinary, will tarnish your perfect reputation. That's not, isn't it? Her voice was barely a whisper now. You've spent your whole life building walls to protect yourself from feeling anything. And the moment feeling something became inconvenient, you ran back behind them. Adrian's face was pale, his hands clenched at his sides. What do you want me to do, Caroline? Sacrifice my entire career for? He stopped, but the silence finished his sentence. For you. Caroline felt something inside her shatter, the last fragile hope that maybe, despite everything, they could be each other's rescue. Your grandfather spent his final years waiting for you to remember how to love someone more than you loved being safe. Her voice was steady now, emptied of everything but truth. And you're proving you never learned. She turned toward the door. Caroline, wait. No. She didn't look back. I kept my promise to Jack. I helped his grandson remember he was human. But I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. She walked out of his office, through the lobby of whispers, out into a city that had already decided who she was. That night, alone in her apartment with the eviction notice on the counter and the silence pressing down like a physical weight, Caroline returned to Jack's grave one final time. I tried, she whispered, laying a single apple tart on the wet grass. I tried to help him find his way back. But some people are too far gone, even for love. She didn't see Adrian watching from the parking lot, his car running but going nowhere, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. She didn't see him break. She'd already left. And in the space between them, vast now, maybe permanent, was the answer to every question about whether love could survive when one person chose safety over truth. It couldn't. 3 weeks passed like a prison sentence. Adrian went through the motions, meetings, depositions, client calls, but everything felt hollow, performative. His partners congratulated him on handling the situation professionally. His colleagues stopped mentioning Caroline's name. The media moved on to someone else's scandal. He'd won, by every metric his world valued. And he'd never felt more like a failure. The turning point came on a Thursday evening. Adrian was working late, again always, when he found himself opening Jack's journals instead of case files. He'd been avoiding them since Caroline left, unable to face the grandfather who'd believed in second chances while he was busy proving he didn't deserve one. But tonight, the silence in his pristine office felt suffocating. He opened to a random page, dated 2 months before Jack's death. Adrian called today. Well, his secretary called. To cancel our lunch. 3rd time this month. I told her it was fine, that I understood he was busy. She sounded relieved, like she'd been expecting me to be angry. I'm not angry. I'm just sad. Sad that my grandson has learned to delegate even his disappointments. That he's built a life where love is scheduled, then rescheduled, then forgotten entirely. I see his father in him sometimes, that same desperate need to be untouchable. Thomas thought money would make him safe. Adrian thinks control will. They're both wrong. Safety isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's having someone worth being vulnerable for. I hope he finds that before it's too late. Before he becomes so good at protecting himself that there's nothing left inside worth protecting. Adrian's hands trembled. He kept reading, page after page of gentle observations and persistent hope, until he reached an entry from 2 weeks before Jack died. Caroline asked me today what I'd say to Adrian if I could. I told her I'd say, I forgive you for staying away. I understand why you did. Your father's choices hurt all of us, and you learned early that loving people meant risking loss. So you stopped risking. But Adrian, and I wish I could tell you this myself, the risk is the point. Love without risk is just strategy. And you've always been too smart for your own good, too calculated. You've forgotten that the best things in life can't be controlled or predicted or defended against. They can only be chosen. I wonder if he'll ever read this. I wonder if it would change anything if he did. Adrian closed the journal carefully, his vision blurred. He'd spent 3 weeks telling himself he'd made the rational choice, the professional choice, the safe choice. But sitting alone in his office at 9 p.m., surrounded by achievements that felt increasingly meaningless, he finally admitted the truth. He hadn't protected Caroline by staying silent. He'd abandoned her, just like he'd abandoned Jack. The pattern was so clear now it hurt to look at. Decades of choosing safety over connection, control over courage, reputation over relationship. His father had destroyed lives through greed and corruption. But Adrian was destroying his own life through cowardice masquerading as pragmatism. And he was tired. God, he was so tired of being the kind of man who let fear make all his decisions. Adrian stood abruptly, grabbed his coat, and left the office for what he suddenly knew would be the last time as a partner at Henderson and Associates. Some choices couldn't wait for morning. He drafted his resignation letter in the car, sitting in the parking lot with his phone's dim light and shaking hands. Effective immediately, I am resigning from Henderson and Associates. The reasons are personal and non-negotiable. I will fulfill my ethical obligations to current clients, but will take no new cases. My equity stake can be bought out according to the partnership agreement. I've spent my career believing that professional reputation mattered more than personal integrity. I was wrong. I choose differently now. He hit send before he could reconsider. Then he drove to the cottage, the one he and Caroline had been fixing up together, the one he hadn't visited since she'd walked out of his office. The house was dark. He'd expected that. What he hadn't expected was the lockbox on the door, the kind real estate agents used. His hands went numb as he checked his email. There, from a property management company. Per your co-owner's instructions, the property at 402 Meadowbrook Lane has been listed for sale, effective immediately. Please contact us to coordinate showing schedules and documentation. She was selling, letting go of Jack's legacy, their shared project, the space where they'd learned to trust each other. Because of him, Adrian sat on the porch steps in the November cold, his expensive suit offering no warmth, and finally, let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. Not the house, not the inheritance. Her, Caroline, who'd shown him that kindness wasn't weakness. That vulnerability wasn't failure. That some things mattered more than winning. And he'd repaid her by choosing silence when she needed his voice most. His phone buzzed. A text from his former senior partner. Adrian, let's discuss this reasonably. Don't make rash decisions you'll regret. He deleted it without responding. Some decisions were only rash if you hadn't spent your entire life avoiding them. He found Caroline 2 days later. Not at her apartment. She'd been evicted. He learned from a neighbor who looked at him with undisguised contempt. Not at the cafe. Linda refused to even confirm if she'd heard from her. He found her at Oakwood Cemetery, sitting beside Jack's grave with a cardboard box of belongings beside her. Caroline. She looked up, her face carefully blank. She'd lost weight. Had circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and stress he'd helped create. What are you doing here, Adrian? He stopped. Started again. I need to talk to you. We talked. 3 weeks ago. You made yourself very clear. I was wrong. Caroline laughed, sharp, humorless. Wow. That must have hurt to admit. It did. Adrian moved closer, slowly, like approaching something wounded. Everything hurts right now, actually. That's new. Congratulations on developing feelings. A little late, but progress is progress. Caroline, please. Please what? She stood, brushing grass from her jeans. Please forgive you. Please understand you were just protecting your career. Please make this easier for you. No. Adrian's voice cracked. Please let me apologize. Really apologize. Not the careful lawyer version. The human version. Caroline crossed her arms, her expression guarded. But she didn't leave. Adrian took a shaky breath. I thought I was protecting myself by staying silent, he said. I told myself that public support would only make things worse, that strategic silence was the smart play. But the truth is, his voice dropped. The truth is I was terrified. Terrified that choosing you meant becoming someone the world could hurt. Someone vulnerable. Someone like your father, Caroline finished quietly. No, Adrian shook his head. Like my grandfather. Like someone who loved openly enough that loss could destroy them. So you destroyed us first. Very efficient. Caroline, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know standing here now, 3 weeks late, doesn't undo the damage. But I need you to know. He pulled out his phone, showed her his resignation email. I quit. This morning. Walked away from the firm, the partnerships, everything I've built. She stared at the screen, then at him. Why? Because none of it matters if I have to be someone I hate to keep it. Because my grandfather left me this inheritance. He gestured at the cemetery, at the space between them. Not property or money, but a chance to be better. And I almost threw it away because being better is scarier than being safe. Adrian, I'm not asking you to take me back, he continued. I'm not asking you to trust me or forgive me or anything you're not ready to give. I'm just asking. His voice broke completely. I'm asking if there's any way I can help. With rent, with finding work, with anything. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, but because you shouldn't suffer for my cowardice. Caroline was quiet for a long moment, studying him with eyes that had learned to see through performance to truth. You really quit, she said finally. This morning. It's probably all over legal news by now. And you came here. After I went to the cottage and saw you'd listed it. Caroline, please don't sell it. It was Jack's legacy, it should stay. I listed it because I couldn't afford to keep paying the utilities, Caroline interrupted. Not because I wanted to let it go. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Then don't. I'll cover everything, taxes, utilities, maintenance. Consider it part of the estate management job I should have formalized months ago. Fair wages, legitimate work, no strings attached. Why would you do that? Because my grandfather trusted me to be someone worth trusting, and I want to try. Adrian's eyes were wet now, his voice stripped of every defense. Because you were right, I've been so afraid of becoming my father that I turned into something worse. Someone who hurts people through absence instead of action. At least you're self-aware, Caroline said, but there was something softer in her tone now. Less anger, more exhaustion. I'm trying to be better, Adrian said. Not for redemption or forgiveness or any kind of narrative arc. Just because I can't look at myself in the mirror anymore knowing I let fear make me cruel. Caroline looked at Jack's headstone, then back at Adrian. You hurt me. Not just professionally, personally. You made me believe we were building something real, then abandoned me the moment it became inconvenient. I know. And I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't undo damage, Adrian. I know that too. He took a careful step closer. But maybe, if you'll let me, I can start trying to repair it. One honest conversation at a time. One day of showing up at a time. Caroline's jaw trembled. I don't know if I can trust you again. That's fair. I haven't earned it. And I won't be your redemption project. I'm not here to save you or fix you or teach you how to be human. I'm not asking you to. Adrian's voice was steady now, certain. I'm asking if we can save the cottage. Together. Keep Jack's legacy alive. And maybe, if I prove myself worthy over time, you'll let me be your friend again. That's all. That's everything. The silence stretched, fragile, tentative. Finally, Caroline nodded once. Okay, but we're drawing up contracts. Real ones. Lawyer-proof ones, ironically. Whatever you need. And if you disappear on me again, I won't. Adrian met her eyes. I promise. No more running. No more silence. I show up, or I don't deserve to be here at all. Caroline studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. Partners. Adrian took it, his grip gentle, grateful. Partners. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginning again is the bravest thing you can do. 6 months later, the morning light through Henderson's table felt different than it had at Maple and Main, warmer somehow, softer, like the cafe itself had learned to exhale. Caroline wiped down the counter, her movements practiced but no longer weary. The exhaustion that had clung to her like a second skin had been replaced by something lighter. Purpose, maybe, or the quiet satisfaction of building something that mattered. The bell above the door chimed. "Good morning, Mrs. Chun," she called without looking up. "Your usual?" "You're getting as good as Jack was at remembering," the elderly woman said, settling into the corner booth, the one by the window where morning light painted everything gold. "He'd be proud of what you've done with this place." Caroline's throat tightened the way it still did sometimes when people mentioned Jack. "We did it together," she said, glancing toward the kitchen where Adrian was attempting, and likely butchering, his third batch of apple tarts that week. The cafe had been Caroline's idea, born from one of their early conversations while painting the cottage. "Jack always said the cafe was where he felt least alone," she'd told Adrian. "What if we created that intentionally? A space for people who need to be seen." Adrian had looked at her with something like wonder. "You mean like a non-profit?" "I mean like a legacy." Henderson's table opened 4 months after their reconciliation, funded by Adrian's liquidated partnership stake and Caroline's unwavering vision. They'd transformed a closed-down diner 3 blocks from Maple and Main into something that felt like coming home. The menu was simple: coffee, tea, homemade pastries, soup that changed daily based on whatever Caroline felt like making. But that wasn't the point. The point was the corner booth reserved for regulars over 70. The point was the pay-what-you-can board where people could leave money for those who couldn't afford their own meals. The point was the wall covered in Polaroids. Every regular who wanted to be remembered, their faces and stories preserved like Jack had deserved to be. "Caroline," Adrian's voice carried from the kitchen, accompanied by the acrid smell of something burning. "I think I need supervision again." Mrs. Chun laughed. "That boy still can't cook." "He's learning," Caroline said diplomatically, heading toward the kitchen. Very, very slowly. She found Adrian staring at a tray of misshapen, slightly scorched tarts with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb. "They're supposed to be golden brown," he said. "These are more bronze. Aggressive bronze." "They're perfect," Caroline lied, taking the tray and setting it aside. "We'll call them rustic." "Rustic is code for burned, but we're pretending it's intentional." "Exactly." She hip-checked him gently. "Now move. I'll handle the tarts. You handle the new regular in booth 3, Mr. Patterson. Widowed last month. Needs someone to talk to." Adrian's expression softened. He was better at this now, at seeing people, at being present without performing. "What does he drink?" "English breakfast. 1 sugar." "And Adrian?" She caught his arm. "Just listen. You don't have to fix anything." He nodded, then paused at the kitchen door. "Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for learning." Caroline watched him go. This man who'd once measured worth in billable hours and won cases, now measuring success in the smile of a grieving stranger who just needed someone to remember his coffee order. The cafe filled steadily through the morning. Young professionals grabbed coffee on their way to work. Mothers with strollers clustered at the large communal table Caroline had insisted on. And in every corner booth, elderly regulars settled in like they were returning home. This was what Jack had wanted, what he'd orchestrated without either of them fully understanding until it was too late to thank him. Not the property or the money, but this, a space where loneliness came to die, where being seen wasn't transactional, where kindness was the currency that mattered. At noon, a young woman approached the counter, nervous, underfed, wearing the particular exhaustion Caroline recognized from her own mirror not so long ago. "How much for coffee?" she asked quietly. Caroline smiled. "What's your budget?" "I have $2. "Perfect. That's exactly what it costs today." Caroline poured the coffee, added a blueberry muffin to the plate. "First time here?" "Yeah. I saw the sign. Everyone welcome, no exceptions." Wasn't sure if it was real. "It's real," Adrian said, appearing beside Caroline with his own coffee. "My grandfather taught us that the world has enough doors that close. This one stays open." The young woman's eyes filled. "Thank you." After she left, Caroline leaned against Adrian's shoulder. "You're getting good at this. I have an excellent teacher." He kissed the top of her head, casual now, comfortable, the kind of affection that had grown slowly from partnership into something neither of them had been brave enough to name for months. Love, as it turned out, looked a lot like showing up, like burned tarts and patient lessons, like choosing presence over perfection every single day. The afternoon rush mellowed into the golden hour, that space between worlds when the cafe felt suspended in amber light and possibility. Caroline was refilling sugar dispensers when she heard it. "Excuse me, young man. How do you take your tea?" She looked up sharply. Adrian stood at Mr. Patterson's booth, holding a fresh pot of English breakfast. The older man was smiling, the first genuine smile Caroline had seen from him in 3 visits. Adrian's face did something complicated. His eyes found Caroline's across the cafe, and she saw him remember. Jack, the morning rituals, the careful way love could be served in porcelain cups and consistent presence. "2 sugars," Adrian said softly, his voice thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "And 1 apology for the delay." Mr. Patterson laughed. "No delay worth apologizing for. You're here now. That's what matters." Caroline pressed her hand to her chest, her vision blurring. Because there it was, Jack's words, his wisdom, his legacy living on in the grandson who'd finally learned that love wasn't weakness. That evening, after the last customer left and they were wiping down tables in comfortable silence, Adrian pulled something from his pocket. "I found this today. In one of Jack's journals we never opened." He handed her a folded piece of paper. Caroline opened it with trembling hands. "If you're reading this, Henderson's table exists." "Good. That's all I ever wanted. A place where my 2 favorite people could build something neither could have built alone. Where kindness isn't currency but breath. Where lonely people remember they matter. Take care of each other. Take care of everyone who walks through that door. And remember, love is the only thing worth inheriting. Everything else is just furniture. With all my love, Jack." "He knew," Caroline whispered. "Somehow, he knew we'd end up here." "He believed," Adrian corrected. "Even when we couldn't believe in ourselves." They stood in the empty cafe. Their cafe, Jack's legacy, proof that love given freely never dies, and let themselves feel the full weight of grace. Outside, the November evening turned the city to shadows and streetlights. But inside Henderson's table, the lights stayed on, a beacon for anyone who needed to remember that kindness was real, that second chances existed, that showing up was its own kind of courage. And in the corner booth where Jack used to sit, where morning light would paint everything gold again tomorrow, 2 sugars waited beside an empty cup, ready for the next person brave enough to be seen.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.